Hello, everybody. So today I want to follow up on a thread, 9 rad movies. Put together. The thread was put together by Garbage Geek, and I was referred over to it, and I checked out his post, and it was really cool. So let's uh, let's do this. Movies. Oh yeah. I mean, a lot of official, a lot of unofficial. Because I used to have a business that I would find weird movies from all over the world before streaming was a thing and convert them for people. I was kind of like Video Search of Miami. And I mean, it just doesn't end. These boxes are full of DVDs in cases, and I got some up there. And, behind the turntable over here is where some of my ultimate favorites reside. Like many of my favorites, Treasure of the Four Crowns is an Italian production. It's sort of a cash in on Raiders of the Lost Ark, kind of crossing it with a caper film. It's an excuse to, as you can tell, throw every conceivable thing at the camera, including rubber pterodactyls. Our hero is out to rescue a set of crowns from a strange cult. The crowns contain jewels that have all the world's power of good and evil within them. It has all the traps that you would expect in a Raiders knockoff. It has all the supernatural antics that you would expect in a Raiders knockoff. And what Raiders knockoff would be complete if it didn't have big balls to run away from? But at least this one has 2 balls instead of one, and they're on fire. Even if they aren't as big, that's pretty cool, especially in 3D. This is the first film I remember as a early teen, like 12, 13 years old, going to the cinema over and over again to see, hanging out in the cinema all day long. I've bought the Blu-ray from Kino. I have an original theatrical one sheet from the marquee that was printed in the 1980s hanging on my wall. I used to have a pair of glasses that were given away. And I have this French LP of the absolutely fantastic Ennio Morricone soundtrack album. This picture inspired me so much that I took an interest in 3D photography. And to this day, I still create native 3D art and photography, typically of animals, especially my own pets. Of course, one of the first ones that's really going to influence you is one of the first that you can get your hands on VHS. And for me, Night of the Living Dead was a huge winner. I got to see it both on tape and in retro shows on the big screen at the Fox Drive-In Theater a few years before I actually started working there. I actually saw it play with Dawn of the Dead and with Evil Dead, which was just a triple feature of awesomeness, especially when you're like 13, 14 years old. And of course, with Night of the Living Dead, how can you look past Dawn of the Dead? I mean, I don't care which version of this you see. You can see the director's cut that's 140 something minutes. You can see the original theatrical cut that was around 2 hours. You can see the European cut under the name Zombie that Dario Argento put together with more of a rock and roll vibe, which is the shortest version, but you'll get something different from all three. So I recommend check out all three because this picture has so many layers. It's just unreal. And speaking of Zombie, when Zombie was released in Europe, Dawn of the Dead was released in Europe as Zombie. Europe did a sort of knockoff thing and made Zombie, also known as Zombies 2, to cash in. And that is Lucio Fulci's masterpiece, which, whatever it lacks in script, it defeats Dawn of the Dead in a different way. Dawn of the Dead has an extraordinary script. Zombie does not, but what it lacks in script, it makes up for in atmosphere. And the mood of this picture is absolutely oppressive. It's a really creepy movie, and it's got beautiful Aughorn cinematography, and crazy makeup effects. This is the eyeball puncture and the Fabio Frizzi score that changed my life. Now I'm kind of self-censoring here with my thumb, but this is a combo soundtrack of Zombie by Fabio Frizzi and the score to Cannibal Ferox by Booty Maglione. And this was put together by a friend in California with Blackest Heart Media, Sean Lewis, and myself, working with Rock Opera Inc. to kind of see some of this stuff restored, because at that point these soundtracks were considered lost. They've since been rediscovered and reissued officially in a much better capacity. It would be a lot for me to dig out, but to give you an idea of the depth of love for this thing, I have the Mondo Death Waltz LP on sort of a greenish vinyl. Beautiful 45 RPM press of the Fabio Frizzi score. There are other colored vinyl versions of it out there, multiple different ones at this point, and I wouldn't mind having all of them, especially since a couple of things have kind of been restored and reinstated. A version of it was released by, I think it was considered still Blackest Heart Media at the time, with a comic book back in the day, and I have that. There were 4 comic books put out from Eyebone Press, which includes a 5-inch record on red vinyl with the original Frizzi score on one side and a cover version on the other side. I have that. I have the Beat Records CD, and something extra, extra, extra special. Back in the 90s, this unofficial compact disc from Splinter Records turned up that has a couple of the Fabio Frizzi tracks and some cover versions that I worked on. And this turned up at a trade show that Lucio Fulci attended in New York City. So I got that autographed by him. And just a couple of years ago, I was able to meet Fabio Frizzi thanks to my friend Humberto Amador. So Fabio has signed the disc itself for me to go with that. Lucio Fulci made at least 4 films that were impactful for me. Actually, I'd say 5. But, I don't want to crowd everything here with just that. So there are 2 that I would like to cover. And the other one, which I also have the Waxworks score for, is sometimes known as Gates of Hell or City of the Living Dead. City of the Living Dead is a surrealist gem with an absolutely superb sort of psych rocking Fabio Frizzi score that feels almost like it has a little bit of a Pink Floyd influence. Reminds me of the end of Shine On You Crazy Diamonds mood. Um, it has lush cinematography, really non-linear narrative structure, over the top, unrealistic, I mean, just biologically impossible, but unforgettably disgusting gore. And it's one of the most unforgettable experiences you'll ever have in your life. It blends all this with foggy atmospherics. The kind of, as you can tell just from this shot, kind of are reminiscent of John Carpenter and his best period. It's just an absolutely stunning and unusual movie that you don't want to miss it. All right, so I saw The Lathe of Heaven when I was probably, I don't know, 11 or 12 years old on public television, adapted from a great science fiction novel and made for public TV. This movie was just absolutely unforgettable. It predated anything of Dreamscape or Freddy Krueger, but really explored the idea of effective dreaming in both nightmarish contexts and in a madman's goal to kind of create an Orwellian sort of perfect utopia that turns into a nightmare as a result of effective dreaming. Uh, it's a really clever, very tiny budget film with an absolutely superb cast. And if you can find a DVD of it out there, or catch it online, or however it is you have to see it, definitely check this movie out. I really wish somebody would put a soundtrack out for it. Maybe I should look into that. You might recognize Bruce Davison from this film, the lead, as the original lead in Willard. He also played George Henderson in the television series version of Harry and the Hendersons, and he's a political figure that's important in the first X-Men movie. I don't think I can get away with showing any clips, but we're not doing these in any particular order, by the way. Um, Another big influence in my life has been animated features. I just absolutely love animated features. Both adult animated features like Ralph Bakshi kind of stuff, Lord of the Rings, Fritz the Cat, Heavy Traffic, Heavy Metal, but also things like the Disney stuff was a really, really big impact on me. And probably the first animated feature to make me really fall in love with animation because of its expressiveness and its brilliantness and creating a sense of space that is not what we usually associate with our reality is Lady and the Tramp, because everything is from the dog's eye level point of view. You're down in their world in this thing, and even when I was a little kid, I somehow recognized this, that I was seeing not only these dogs given personality, but I was recognizing that the animators had somehow made them walk and move specifically in the way of the breeds of dogs that each of the characters represented. So they were very humanized, but they were also very much dogs still. And everything in the film, right down to the background paintings, is presented from their perspective. And it's just an incredible work of art. Plus, I fell in love with the Peggy Lee songs and the incidental score and just absolutely everything about the film. It's, I think, the first animated film to be presented in CinemaScope as a feature. And so that kind of added to it as well, giving it more of an epic scale. And I don't know, to this day, it's just a very magical film to me. So Lady and the Tramp is definitely in this list. For some reason, I find that in my youth, I kind of got attracted to film that was sort of nonlinear in its narrative structures and experimented with film language. That said, one that I caught when I was about 12 or 13 years old, again on PBS, was Dalton Trumbo's Johnny Got His Gun, which had a stellar cast including Timothy Bottoms in his first starring role, Jason Robards, and Donald Sutherland in, get this, the role of Jesus Christ. Is he the biblical Christ? No, not exactly. He's Christ of sort of fantasy, I guess you could say. He's the figment of the imagination of the main character. If you're not familiar with this film, if you remember Metallica having a hit record, the breakout record for them was One. There was a music video for that about a character who winds up with his arms and legs and face blown off in a foxhole and is turned into a life support experiment. All of that footage and all of that concept for the song originated from the band seeing this film. And the film plays out kind of in a reversal of Wizard of Oz, or I guess you could say in the same as Wizard of Oz. All of the reality scenes outside of this character's body in the medical tents and hospitals and wherever he happens to be rolled that day are filmed in black and white. All of the vignettes inside of his head are in full color, and it's a mishmash of memories and psychoses and delusions and dreams. And he really is struggling to initially figure out what has happened to him because they think he's brain dead, but he's not. And then he's struggling to figure out how to communicate with the outside world while going through this degenerative mental breakdown, basically. It's a very tragic, very horrible film in many ways, but it's also just brilliantly crafted and acted and emotive and has scenes in it of great beauty and extraordinary surrealism. It really impacted me a lot because it was one of the first times that I'd seen a film that really followed a dreamlike structure. And that's another reason why I like The Lathe of Heaven, is it sort of did that as well. In an effort to keep things kind of quiet at the house day to day, and when I'm home I'm tired, I just keep updating this video from in the field, so excuse that I didn't use clips on the last couple of bits, and I'm not using clips right now. But right now I'm not going to do the last one, the number 9. Instead, I'm going to kind of go in and kind of cover some things that would be very, very much honorable mentions, because growing up, my first real love of cinema probably came from creature features, of course. I caught The Mummy's Hand when I was probably 6 years old or so, watching that type of programming with my sister. So that was an instant love of Universal Monsters. On further review, though, I looking back on it, I see today that it was much more tongue-in-cheek and played for comedy than the rest of the series. Not as much as Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy, which is, by the way, a great film too. But it is purposefully silly, and the footage in it that impacted me the most was actually stuff that had been taken from the first Mummy film with Karloff and integrated into that one as almost sort of a flashback kind of thing. But I fell in love with all of the Universal monsters, all of the B movies that would show on weekends. I remember being almost traumatized by a picture called The Monolith Monsters, and all it was rocks that when they get wet, they grow, they tumble, they fall into more water, they get wet, they grow, they tumble, but anything they're around, they decalcify. So you wind up with people basically having the Medusa effect, where they turn to stone. And it bothered me because there was a little girl in the film that wound up on an iron lung because it didn't entirely kill her. It just really ruined her life, so it was a very, very kind of creepy film in that way. I also remember The Giant Ants and Them was a very creepy movie, and the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and then absolutely fell in love with the 70s remake with Sutherland. That probably was my first love of sort of apocalyptic us versus them kind of variant on outbreak sort of things, was Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and seeing how that worked. But I fell in love with all that stuff. So, I mean, everything Universal, everything Hammer that played on television, I saw all of the Amicus films. The Amicus film that I loved the most was Asylum, because the first story in that, with the dismembered woman wrapped in newspaper and all the parts come after the guy, really, really creeped me out when I was a kid. And I recognized the music in it as a fan of Mussorgsky, because they used primarily Night on Bald Mountain and Pictures at an Exhibition to score that film. So these borderline library track adaptations of classical music actually kind of worked to make it more effective. There was some original music in it as well. And of course all the Vincent Price stuff, because it was very tongue-in-cheek, all that Corman Poe films, and especially Dr. Phibes and Theater of Blood. All that stuff was just stuff that I was in love with. And when I got a job working at the drive-in, I was set for life. So those types of films and import films, Italian films, be they spaghetti westerns, sword and sandals, sometimes referred to as peplum, giallo thrillers, all that is stuff that I just instantly fell in love with. The films of Paul Naschy from Spain, and the Blind Death series by Armando de Osorio. Those are the pictures that shaped my youth and shaped my interest in a lot of things, both with cinema and with music. And for some reason, in the midst of all that, discovering surrealism in cinema and experimentation, the films of Ken Russell, seeing Altered States for the first time, and seeing Tommy, really, really experimental movies that still stick with me to this day. So yeah, that's kind of my roots, that started as young as 6-7 years old, and then just taking headfirst dives every time I could get access to something that was questionably appropriate for someone of my age. I was in the thick of it as long as no one else was watching, and just falling in love with all this stuff. And honestly, my sister can be partly to blame for this. She would come home from our local drive-in cinema, the Fox Drive-In in Jacksonville, Florida, and tell me all of the horrible, crazy, insane things that she had seen on the screen there, and I was just obsessed with going until eventually she started taking me. So I went to Blood Night there, and I saw the Philippine Blood Island pictures, Mad Doctor of Blood Island and Beast of Blood playing sequentially, and those played with Blood Feast, and of course Bloodsuckers, which was a retitle of Candle of the Devil, and some other movie with blood in the title. I think Blood Castle or no, not Baron Blood. It was the one with Christopher Lee in it, that he's drawn and quartered at the beginning of it. It was a really strange picture, a German film. And I have the film. I'm just not recalling the title accurately at the moment. I saw my Herschel Gordon Lewis films out there beyond Blood Feast, the Gore Girls, the Gruesome Twosome, 2000 Maniacs, the Wizard of Gore. Let's see, I saw 2 of the Ilsa films out there, which I'd rather not even go into the titles of them, the extended titles. And let's see, I don't know. I think one of the first memorable nights for seeing Hollywood Fair out there, she took me out there, and I got to see a triple feature with some kids that, I'd hang out with at the flea markets, and we just set up deck chairs. And these were all Avco Embassy distribution at the time, but they've been picked up by much larger distributors today. A little picture called Prom Night, and it was playing with John Carpenter's The Fog, and those were playing with The Howling. So that was a paradise night for me, of course. And I don't know, I just lived for this stuff, and I still am absolutely very passionate about it, and a lot of my record collection is based on soundtracks from it and bands that have taken inspiration from these sorts of pictures. And, I like them because they're hokey. They may be explicit, they may be over the top, but if they get to be too believable, that bothers me. I mean, the dead are not coming back to life. Zombies are not marching into the backyard to come get me. There are not werewolves coming over the fence. So none of that stuff bothers me. And I'm not going to be someone who's fazed by that. That's why I can find them enjoyable, because I don't take them very seriously. And when I had my band project in the past, and it had a lot of themes and inspiration from that, I purposefully chose the name at that time, Alucarda. Now there's another band called that, but I did that because I wanted it to be tongue-in-cheek. I wanted there to be a sense of humor about it, and for what we were doing not to be taken very seriously. Anyway, the last film is kind of still an underdog movie of sorts, and it is another Italian movie, but I'm going to switch up genres on this one. This is one that my mother introduced to me, and I'll wait till I can get back to the house so that I can do something more appropriate with it. So we will see a change in background again. I'm not going to just keep rambling. It's very, very tongue-in-cheek, very fun, and it introduced me to a whole world of films by 2 particular actors that I enjoy to this day, and as recently as in the last couple of years have discovered a number of films from them that I didn't even know existed for a very long time. My Name is Nobody is a stylish spaghetti western parody of spaghetti western, starring Mario Girotti, known today as Terence Hill. At 11 or 12 years old, I had absolutely no interest in westerns, and my mother turned me on to this incredibly funny and artistic movie. It was probably my first real spaghetti movie that I understood exactly what that was. Not only did that turn into a huge appreciation for spaghetti westerns, but also for the duo of Terence Hill and Carlo Pedersoli, aka Bud Spencer, who later teamed up and They Call Me Trinity and went on to make I don't know how many films, well over a dozen, possibly 24 as a comedy team. And they're just the ultimate fun, outrageous buddy movies. I understand that Jackie Chan is a fan of this duo and has gotten some influence from some of the stuff that they've done. My personal favorite, Watch Out, We're Mad. This is not a Western. It has no plot to get in the way of the action, and this is one that I saw, I think, for the first time in my mid to late 20s when I was in the search business. The entire plot is some gang members destroy a dune buggy and they insist it be replaced. And when that is refused, they basically vow as a duo to take down the entire mob and then proceed to spend the next 90 minutes wreaking havoc on them, as you see here. And while they play their bits with confidence, you can kind of tell, even though it's not Hong Kong martial arts style, which I am a big fan of those movies, and it doesn't have that lack of confidence that makes Jackie Chan movies funny. They're very confident. Some of the ridiculousness of the stunts and the use of gymnastics is very similar in the choreography. So there's a lot of fun and funny in these pictures. A couple of honorable mentions. First, from the great Quincy Jones, Diana Ross, Michael Jackson, Nipsey Russell, Ted Ross, and Richard Pryor in The Wiz, one of the most bizarre and fascinating sort of do-overs I've ever seen in my life. It's a great, fun musical modernization of the classic Wizard of Oz, and I actually enjoy it much more than The Wizard of Oz. Every kid has movie star crushes, and one of my first was Pam Grier, who I first saw in Coffee, and it was an amazing introduction to a woman that did an amazing line of films where she was incredibly empowered and determined and just a total badass in every single picture. Master of the Flying Guillotine. This was my introduction to the best of Shaw Brothers cinema, and particularly to Jimmy Wang Yu, who I think was actually one of Jackie Chan's trainers. And it's just an outrageous movie, but I just loved the concept of the flying guillotine itself and some of the more outrageous things, like this guy whose arms can just grow. That's just incredibly bizarre to me. It's too much fun. Even after recently thinning out my library quite a bit, I still have somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 films. Most of it is lower budget kind of stuff like this from all over the world, from Turkey, Hong Kong, Japanese kaiju films, Yakuza actioners, things like that. I could do this all day and all day tomorrow, but I wanted to just follow up with a few things that really influenced me and struck a nerve with me when I was a kid at the end, some honorable mentions. So anyway, I hope you had fun with this video. I hope that maybe I turn you on to some movies you haven't seen or that you're willing to give a chance that are kind of underdog films. That's the stuff that I typically like best. And go check out some other guys' rad nines, because I'm sure there's a lot of other great stuff out there to check out. I've been kind of surfing those videos off and on all day today when I've had an opportunity. So have fun and see you real soon. Thanks for watching.